The Black Legion. Two horror stories, one from the future and one from the past, featuring Madame Raven. Enjoy.
Grim Future by Blood Empress. I can't remember. The other car came out of nowhere. Connor will relay mechanically in his dissociated state, stitching together fragmented memories for the police report after the accident. He will stare at the scene of the crash, glancing at each piece of scattered shrapnel reflecting his broken thoughts. The lights from the cruisers, ambulances, and noisy rubberneckers will cause his head to throb, adding to the chaos of his universe. Eventually the shock will pass, and he will collapse to his knees on the cold pavement in agony, grief overwhelming him. One vision will burn into his psyche, silencing the growing cacophony of his own thoughts. A seemingly innocuous item which will fester in the back of his mind until he ended his own life many years later. A bright yellow bumper sticker. Earlier that evening, Connor was enjoying a late, quiet autumn drive with his wife, Megan, down a lonely residential road. He was admittedly dizzy from the night's festivities, out with their mutual friends, but he insisted he was sober enough to take the wheel. Despite his assurances, he pressed the accelerator a bit harder than usual, hoping to make it home before any cops had a chance to complicate his evening. The couple sat in silence, intertwining their hands between them, falling under the spell of the rhythmic strobe of passing streetlights. Megan kept her eyes trained out her window at the changing leaves, squeezing her spouse's hand intermittently. Connor ogled her with a lazy, drunk smile on his face. Turning his back to the road, he snapped out of his hypnotic state and slammed on the brakes in response to the quickly approaching taillights, which threatened a meeting with the front of their own car. "Jesus!" Connor spat as he and his wife lurched forward. "Where the hell did this joker come from?" he cried aloud. He hadn't noticed any car ahead of them when he looked at the road only seconds before. A feeling of anger rose within him as his pleasant evening drive was interrupted by overcautiousness. "Honey, you need to relax. You are going too fast," Megan said matter-of-factly. "Yeah, well, this idiot is going slower than 30. There's nobody around. Speed up," Connor shouted as if the newcomer could hear him. The driver ahead showed no signs of hearing his demands and continued to cruise at a glacial pace. Connor took note of the "Baby on Board" sticker on the bumper, a bumper which had caved in, most likely from another car slamming into its slow backside. He rolled his eyes knowingly. His car had the same sticker on its bumper. Earlier he protested putting it on the car he shared with his wife, but Megan had been adamant about it. "Why would you want to advertise having a kid, especially with potential kidnappers everywhere?" Connor reasoned, but Megan insisted that other motorists would drive more carefully around them, knowing they had a child in the car. Connor felt the collapsed bumper on the other car as evidence of the contrary. He kept this thought to himself. Connor leaned on the horn and flashed his high beams. As he did so, he noticed there was a passenger in the car. The two figures faced ahead, neither turning in their seats to acknowledge the noisy car behind them. They didn't pull over to the side. Instead, they continued at their leisurely speed. "Seriously? They're going to pretend we're not here? Come on!" Connor honked a few more times, but there was still no reaction from the other car. He took their indifference as insolence, which ignited his anger into rage. "You're getting angry for no reason," Megan said coolly. "We need to let the babysitter go. I'm not paying him for an extra hour." White-knuckling the steering column, Connor swerved to the oncoming lane before he could floor the accelerator. The car ahead merged into the other lane swiftly along with them. The car remained in front of Connor and his wife, blocking their advance. Seething, Connor yelled, "What the frick is this guy's problem?" "That's obviously just some stupid kids messing with us. Let's just stay calm and not give him the satisfaction of riling us up. Forget the babysitter, we'll be home shortly," Megan soothed. Connor wasn't having it. Now he was hell-bent on either passing the pair in front of them or cornering them and beating their asses. The liquid fueled his bravado. He maneuvered back to the right lane, but the car matched his path exactly. The ease of their maneuvers confirmed Connor's suspicion that the occupants of the other car had harassed other drivers before. Wanting to get away from the nuisance, Connor tried to think of another way to bypass the other car. Unfortunately, the road on which they traveled didn't branch off anywhere to get around the offending vehicle. Their only chance was at the end of the road, where there was a red light for a T intersection. However, that light was still a few miles away, and Connor's patience was wearing thin as the other car continued its deceleration. Determined to circumvent the sluggish car, Connor tried one more ploy. This time he swung to the left, cut short, and swung back to the right, hoping the other car would be caught off guard. They weren't. Instead, the other car seamlessly matched Connor's position, shifting left, then abruptly changing course back to the right lane. The way the other car matched their position struck Connor as odd. He hadn't noticed it before, but there was no hesitation from the other car. No split-second pause to consider Connor's next play. Their movements weren't that of a copycat. Rather, it was like they knew what he was going to do. Connor's brief feelings of confusion were overcome by his feelings of anger, and he responded to the other car's tricks in the most childish way he knew, and quickly flipped them the middle finger. He watched the shadowy figure driving the other car do the same. Again, there was no hesitation, as the other driver's hand shot up along with Connor's. Wanting to test a theory, Connor allowed his hand to linger in the air longer than necessary, waiting for the unknown driver to put his hand down, but instead it stayed hovering in the air. Connor's anger subsided a bit. In its place, a sense of unease crept in. He unfolded his other fingers, twisted his hand to present an open palm to the other car, and gave a small wave. Connor, eyes wide, gawked as the silhouetted hand of the other driver slowly formed an open palm, turned to face the windshield, and waved out to the empty road ahead of them. Every motion was in harmony with Connor's action. The mild gesture sent a ripple of fear down Connor's spine. He yanked his hand back to the steering wheel and observed the other driver do the same. "Did you see that?" Connor flinched at the edge of panic in his voice. "You waved at the guy you've been bitching about for the last 10 minutes? "Yeah, I was there for that." Sarcasm tinted her voice. "No, there's something weird going on." He couldn't take his eyes off the mysterious figure. "He's just messing with you." "No, I'm sure what's going on, but it's as if he knows what I'm going to do. I don't think we should be anywhere near this guy anymore." Connor's eyes darted around the empty road, hoping for some signs of life, to provide help or at least comfort. But it was only him, his wife, and the couple in the dented vehicle ahead of them. Megan noticed nothing, so Connor tried to push his worry aside, but he couldn't shake the feeling. They continued to drive in silence. Connor's hand tightened the grip on the wheel, straining the skin along his knuckles. The tension increased with every passing minute, until the quiet was cut by the sounds of Megan's phone ringing, which caused Connor to jump in his seat. Without turning, he felt her eyes on him, the same eyes she'd penetrated him with whenever he was overreacting. She reached into her bag and produced the phone. The phone pressed to her ear, and Connor gaped at the passenger of the other car, who had also put something to their ear. He was certain now that he wasn't hallucinating everything. The anonymous pair were, somehow, mirroring Connor and his wife. Megan hung up and mentioned something about the babysitter, but Connor was too engrossed with the occupants in the other car to hear what she was saying. Fear began to sink in, thinking about whoever or whatever was in the other car. Both cars drove slowly for the remaining few miles of the road. A million things ran through Connor's mind. He worried that the pair in the other car were sociopaths, part of a cult, possibly gang members, and that him and his wife were involved in some unnerving gang initiation. He wanted to turn around, but that would mean driving miles back the way they came, and he was afraid the shady couple would turn to follow them, and that was worse than having them lead. Mercifully, they came around a bend which brought them to a red light at a T intersection. Both cars stopped to wait for the light to change. When the light slipped to green, nothing happened. Connor and Megan waited for the other car's turn signal, but it never came. The two shadows stared ahead at the empty intersection, idling at the light as if to dare Connor to give way first. He gnawed on his cheek, hoping the other couple would just speed off, and whatever else was going on was just some horrible practical joke. But they didn't budge. "Why aren't they moving? The light is green," Megan asked her husband, confused. A few more seconds of the standoff, and Connor steeled himself to put a stop to whatever it was the dark couple were trying to do. Connor cautiously stretched a hand into the back seat, fearing he might spook the shadow couple if he moved too quickly, and snatched the ice scraper from the floor. It was a poor excuse for a weapon, but he needed a defense in case the other couple was dangerous, and with every second that passed, Connor became more convinced that they were. "Megs, I need you to stay in the car. Make sure you have 911 dialed on your phone and get into the driver's seat. In case something goes wrong, I want you to be out of here and calling them," Connor implored. "Connor, you're overreacting." She tried to calm him down, but she was visibly nervous. Maybe so, but still. "Get into the driver's seat and put the car in reverse so you're ready to take off." She recognized the seriousness in his face and nodded. Connor took a deep breath to prepare for whatever he was going to face, and opened the car door. He was surprised that nothing stirred within the other car. He stepped out into the cool night air, and his wife slid into his seat. She closed the door behind him and locked it. Warily, Connor shuffled towards the driver's side of the sinister car and raised the ice scraper, clutching it tightly in both hands. His heart knocked against his ribcage. He caught an incomplete view of the front of their car, but noted it was similarly devastated as the back of the vehicle. He licked his lips, attempting to get strength into his voice, and barked to the occupants in the dented car. "I'm not sure what your problem is, but get the hell away from—" Suddenly the car accelerated and shot across the intersection. Instead of turning, it plowed through the guardrail along the intersection. The sound of screeching metal and metal punctured through the night, and Connor watched the savage bumper and comical sticker of the other car disappear and plummet 100 feet into the vegetation below. Dumbfounded, Connor froze mid-step. A few seconds of his wife shrieking finally coaxed him back from his shock. "Megs, call the police right now. Tell them someone drove off the road and may need help." He whipped his head to see her nod in compliance, but she shook terribly. The ice scraper lowered and Connor ambled across the intersection. He loitered near the part of the barrier still intact. He hesitated before inspecting the scene, not wanting to see body parts or any mess that was down there. He breathed deep and peered over the cliff. There was nothing. Connor's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. He squinted harder to scrutinize the dark underbrush, but he could discern nothing. There was no glow from the daylights, no glint of moonlight on the car's surface, and no sound of a constant blaring horn. The barrier was torn, though, evidence that an object crashed through it, but that object somehow disappeared. Without glancing back, Connor called over his shoulder, "Megs, the car is gone." "What?" she shouted back. "There's no car." Connor spun around in time to witness an enormous semi-truck slam into the back of their car. Like a rocket, their little sedan, with his wife inside, bolted across the road. The gust of wind created by the car's speed was enough to blow him back and steal the air from his lungs. His eyes met his wife's terrified gaze for a heartbeat. Her glossy green eyes wide and fearful, and she disappeared over the edge. A moment of disbelief passed, then Connor roared Megan's name. He stalled, reluctant to look over the edge again. He had a small glimmer of hope that once again nothing would be at the bottom of the cliff. He agonizingly tracked his gaze back to the depths, and this time a car lay there in ruin, a crushed metallic heap at the bottom of the dark pit. Before he falls into shock, unable to think coherently, before the police arrive too late to save his wife, Connor notices one thing: the unmistakable "Baby on Board" sticker, which clung to the remnants of the collapsed bumper on the back of their car. It was unsettling to him how familiar that bumper seemed.
The Gallery of Henry Balchop by a anonymous author. If you go into this one tiny dingy one-story bar in Paris, and the right bartender is behind the counter that night, you might be able to see an exclusive gallery show of the lost works of one Henry Balchop. But to get in, you have to prove you're a devotee of the artist. You'll be asked in clear and perfect English, "What would like to partake of this glorious night?" Answer, "Abesthi." No matter what, any other drink from whiskey to water will kill you as you sleep. The next question will regard the type, and you must answer one of two things: the stuff that man himself could not bear to take, or the good stuff, the best stuff. If you ask for any other, absinthe, in any other way, you will be plagued by nightmares for 13 days. Each night's dream will be more horrible than the last, until upon the 13th dream, your nightmare will follow you every moment of your waking and sleeping life. Don't try and cheat the barkeep. The door locked behind you. You have to drink what he gives you, doom or not. That such a powerful man granted you audience should be enough. Besides, I've heard that the dying complimented his drinks in their last throes. If you make it that far before sealing your fate, the bartender will say, "Be sure you handle this with care. This is the finest I have." From here, you may do one of two things. Say, word for word, "I've overestimated my fortitude, and I bid you good eve." If the barkeep nods, you may leave the door you entered unharmed and with nothing gained and nothing lost, except the time spent inside. Or you can go on. You will be given a glass with a 7-sided rim, with each side twisting ever so delicately around the basin until forming a sleek and simple handle. You will also receive a very, very, very special absinthe spoon in the shape of a key. The holes at the key's top serve as the draining point for the alcohol to pour over the sugar cube, and of course, an unmarked bottle stripped long ago of its label, scraps of paper sticking to its sides, covered in the rot of the decades past. The spoon is completely flat, but has two distinct sides, one with a groove along the shaft of the key, and one without. Turn the shaft down, so its groove will be face down. If you attempt this face up, your absinthe will taste foul. Your nose will burn, and your eyes will shrivel in their sockets with unspeakable horrors not of this world. If your spoon is the right way up, begin preparing the absinthe as one would. Put the sugar on the spoon and pour the alcohol over so it gains its color and special qualities. Say cheers to your friend, the barkeep, and bottoms up. If you don't, the absinthe will burn every innard it touches with the power and pain of sulfuric acid. If you've done it right, the already dim lights will go off. The darkness will consume the bar. Don't be afraid. The darkness is the cue that you've been approved for the exhibit. Wait out the darkness and keep silent as the dead, lest the bartender decide to make you so. Eventually, not too long, 2 to 3 minutes, a green floodlight will shine brightly on a door on the far wall of the bar. The bar will be bathed in green, and not just from the floodlight. Light, luminescent spheres will gently drift through the room, and the barkeep will no longer be there, nor any other unassuming patron inside before. There's no danger by this point. Consider it a safe point. If you didn't finish the absinthe, you don't have to, but you might need the alcohol. Either way, take the spoon and put it in the keyhole of the green-lit portal's doorknob. It will fit perfectly and reach the end of the keyhole with a resounding click. Inside is a small elevator with the most beautiful woman any mortal eyes can imagine, bathed in green glow in just such an angle that the light refracts beyond her into the shape of wings. The green fairy herself will ask you, "Going up?" And considering all the trouble you went through, it would only make sense to say, "Yes." Now, you have one more hurdle to clear. She will ask you as you cross the line from the bar to the compartment, how would you compare Beauchamp's surrealism to that of, say, René Magritte? For your reply, you must say, I've come to see more than art tonight. If you don't, the green floodlight will blow out, the doors will slam shut, the elevator will plummet through a seemingly infinite blackness before a red light grows brighter as the elevator nears the very depths of hell. Now, if your elevator begins to go up, the green light will also fade, but in its place will be the cool glow of the moon. But before you even recognize it, the elevator will reach the top of its, well, let's call it a shaft to not get too intricate. Now, I'm not as sure about this as the rest, but I've heard that if the green fairy kisses you on the cheek as she leaves the elevator, you will always be blessed with a creative inspiration, a permanent, ever-changing muse. You can't ask her, you can't kiss her. She has to do it of her own volition. If not, well, nothing but no reason to do it. Anyway, and anger the woman who is responsible for keeping the Beauchamp painting safe for so many years. You will enter from the elevator a turn-of-the-century parlor with a large poster of Henry Beauchamp on the left side of the opposite wall. On the right is a door. Taking the time to read the poster is a fairly good idea, as it explains the very significance of Monsieur Beauchamp. You see, he was a struggling surrealist in the 1920s, always making art to try to be free of all premeditation, and managed to do so. You see, after one night in a tiny, dingy, one-story bar in Paris, he began to paint patterns. First, it was the geometric patterns, then complete fractals, then images that would be in the newspaper the next day, then next week, then from 50 years ago, 100 years in the future, 200 years in the past. Then, on his last night of life, he kidnapped 3 young girls from their homes at night, murdered them, and painted his finest masterpieces in reds and yellows with the blood and bile of virgins. He committed suicide immediately after, painting exactly 13 of these. These are behind the door. The first 6 from the left show from left to right the genius of the universe, the only true visage of God as viewable to the eyes of man, the true image of Jesus Christ, the sprawling clouds of heaven, every pope from the first to faces not yet recognizable, and a portrait of Jesus' appearance in his second coming. The other 6 on the right show from right to left the cataclysm of the universe, the only true visage of Satan as viewable to the eyes of man, the true image of Judas, the sprawling flames of hell, every human embodied demon from the first 2 faces not yet recognizable, and a portrait of the Antichrist in his second coming. Now, 6 and 6 makes 12, but what of the 13? The 13th painting is turned around on its wall pin, the image facing the wall, the space around it is roped up at a very wide diameter, and under the flipped image is a sign in 3 languages. The top is in the scriptures of the seraphim, the bottom in the runes of the highest demonic orders, and in the middle in Roman letters. Do not touch. Now, like the kiss, I can't say this part with as much certainty, but all the same I heard that somehow as he died, Bolchap flayed his skin, his organs, his very soul into some sort of college. And how he took his dead body and created such a horrific masterpiece I could never say, nor would I ever dare to. So, if you make it, maybe you can flip the canvas over and tell me sometime. You can tell me about it over a drink.